Oh, hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest of the QT2 Systems podcast series. This one's called the QT2 Roundtable. And basically, what we're going to talk about on this podcast is various topics relating to endurance sports. We'll bring them to you, single topic on each one, but multiple perspectives. On episode 1 today is the new season kickoff, and our guests today we have two QT2 systems coaches, Gerry and Bob Richter, and then we have the core diet registered dietitian, Kylie McKenzie. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. Thanks so much. Thanks for being guinea pigs on the first one. All right, so I'm going to start. Here we are. We're recording in the middle of January, some of the shortest, coldest days of the year. Also, a time of year that people probably took some time off before they got here. So the first thing I actually want to talk about is backtrack you 6-8 weeks, and I want to just get your perspective on if people should be taking an off season. Should be taking time off. Finished a race, let's say in October. Should you take time off from your schedule? Tim, I'm going to start with you on this one.
The cough right away. No, I'm just kidding. It did come up. It's really hard because I think it depends on the athlete, to be completely honest. I don't think one fits all. I do think it should be a little less structured. And I think you should have less hours, certainly. Some athletes kind of need the entire time off, and it's good mentally for them. And it's good for some people that have like families with younger kids to kind of regenerate around the holidays and not have to worry about workouts. For that part, it's really good. But yet I have some older athletes that they enjoy the structure. So if it's Christmas and it's Saturday, they expect to do a 3-hour ride or a 4-hour ride. And if they don't, I'm doing something wrong if I don't do it. So I really think it goes based off of the situation that they're in, their goals and expectations, and what part of life they're in, and a little bit of their personalities as well. I have some that, once they're off a routine, it's really hard to get them back into it. So I kind of keep it more, they're on a routine, but it's a less time commitment. And then other ones that they just they need a complete break mentally and physically from it so that they can come right back into it, kind of really totally rejuvenated. And again, I have the third athlete that kind of needs to keep kind of training through it, different types of training, but they enjoy it and they need it. And it kind of helps drive them into the next season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do you think, Bob? Do you see similar things, or do you have
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could have, those words could have come out of my mouth. I mean, it's exactly the same thing that I see as well. It's very dependent upon each athlete. From one spectrum, having an athlete that very much enjoys the structure and daily training, it's part of their way of life, so to speak. So in those situations, it's more of, adjusting volume for the time of the year and whether or not there's a race. For example, if you have an athlete that just did, say, Ironman Arizona or something, and then that was their last big event of the year, then, I would encourage them to let's take it down now and rest and get a deep recovery. But that person may want to continue to do daily training just at a much lower volume. And as Tim mentioned, I have athletes, with smaller children, and they really want to focus on family during the holidays and take more of a break and do their own thing, basically. Just very light training before they come back after the holidays. So again, like Tim said, it's very athlete specific. Their stage of life, their age, their family situation, a variety of things that come into play. So we just need to ask lots of questions and design things that fit kind of what the athlete is looking for and what their personal goals are. At the same time, making sure they're not going, all out like full on Ironman training year round. I mean, you're going to burn out eventually, and get injured or both. So you have to try to rein that in as well. So
yeah. And Kylie, I'm sure that during the holidays, everyone eats all the fruits and vegetables and they don't go to any of them, right?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you can't take off from nutrition 100%, right? We all need to eat, we all need to drink, like where's everybody's water? But I do think the focus definitely shifts, right? So when I like to approach nutrition, I like to look at it from the health standpoint. What should we be eating to have long, healthy lives? To the performance, what should we be eating to maximize our performance, our recovery as endurance athletes? And then 3, the pillar of enjoyment, right? And so we forget sometimes that food's supposed to be fun. And so I think during this time, the balance might shift across those 3 pillars, less of a performance pillar if perhaps you're not working out as intensely as you might be, say, heading into your A race, right? But we still have the health piece, we still have the enjoyment piece. And I think now is a fun time, very similar to maybe, trying new activities, right? Still getting your heart rate up, but doing it in a slightly different way, trying a new sport, trying a new activity, just to, have some fun. Same thing applies in the kitchen, right? Now's a great time to try new recipes, explore, especially going back to, if you have small kids, that's a great way to get them in the kitchen and kind of do some family events around food and nutrition. So I would say we can't take it off entirely, but the balance and the focus definitely shifts in terms of where we're going to prioritize our time when we view nutrition in the off season.
Yeah, I was laughing this year for Christmas. We did Christmas dinner at my sister's house and Christmas Eve at my house. And I got all my recipes out of the Core Diet cookbook. I'm like, I'm going to make really good stuff and you're going to have no idea how healthy it is for you, And it was awesome. They're like, wow, this is so good. I'm like, yeah, it was actually really good. And that was good because the next day it was not out of the Core Diet cookbook. And it was little, not so much, but both of them tasted really good. And all right. So now here we are, though. We're in January. There's no more. Okay, maybe a couple days after the new year, people are still not quite there, but we're here. We're dead in the middle of January. It is time. People are like ready to go back. When I was running on the treadmill, like right after the new year, every commercial was on weight loss and new drugs and all that stuff. So what happens like when people come back now and they're like, okay, I just put on 15 pounds. I drinking a lot more than I should. What kind of resets or not do you try to do with people as they come back to the season?
I would say not trying to do a complete overhaul at once, right? I think some people are like, oh shit mentality. Like I need to like change everything right now. And sometimes assign some morality to it. Like I've been so bad. It's like, no, you haven't been bad. You've just maybe shied away from where we should be the majority of the year. Like it's okay. We are human, right? And so I think kind of talking them off the ledge a little bit and working on some smaller goals to kind of really just start adding some structure, right? So that typically means, all right, well, let's just have some guiding principles, right? Like, are we eating consistently? Are we incorporating consistent protein sources? Do we have any fruits and vegetables on our plate, right? What do we look like from a hydration standpoint? So just kind of focusing on some smaller goals to build on will ultimately help them when they have that structure to build off of when we start adding in some more volume, right? Because then those fueling windows show up again and become more of a priority. So I think the biggest thing right now is not trying to do a total reset, right? Not buying into that new year, new me mentality, but building off what's worked well in the past and kind of meeting them where they're at to set those small, meaningful goals really helps kick off the new year.
Okay.
And I find that they try to skip their training nutrition to cut their calories when they put on weight on the off season. So all of a sudden you find them bonking and later on bike rides or on runs because they're like, well, I put on 6 pounds. So I just figured I had enough extra weight in here. I didn't do my gels. I didn't do my Gatorade. I didn't do my bars. And I'm like, all right, well, that's the one place we can't cut the calories, like when you're actually doing it. But I see that more often than not, that it's those calories that they want to cut, not their, bag of peanut M&Ms after the bike ride that they want to cut, or their, Oh, listen, peanut M&Ms are my favorite. So I
hey, all foods fit. All foods fit, right?
Yeah,
Some more than
I
others.
am guilty 100%. That's my go-to. But I find a lot of athletes that when they think about losing weight when they come back, it's going to be the gels or their Gatorade, all that stuff that really they need at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting point, and I had this conversation actually earlier this week, Tim, with regards to hydration, right? A lot of us might be in colder climates right now, and there might be a misconception that like, hey, I'm not sweating. I'm not perceived to be sweating as much, right? I don't need to really hydrate. But that's not true, right? We still need fluids. We're still sweating. We might not be sweating as much as we are, say, in the middle of the summer, right? But we still need those fluids. And I think we sometimes forget that. So it's a good reminder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So from a training perspective, let's start with the athlete who has taken some time off, has been like, back in the day when I used to race bikes, when our last bike race was done, they're like, hang up your bike and don't touch it for 6 weeks. Like, don't touch it. I don't think that happens as much anymore, where you completely just, throw it out the window. But let's take the athlete who has taken some time off. Like, was like, I finished my Ironman, I'm burned out. It's the holidays. I want to hang out with my family. I just want to rest, and I just don't want to do any training. And now it's January. Bob, they call you up and they say, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
What do you do? What does the training schedule look like for an athlete?
Yeah, that's a good one. And that happened just this week. An athlete of mine reached out to me and said, I'm ready to get back into the routine, back into the rhythm, basically. And so, we had a conversation about it, and I said, look, you've had several weeks of very little volume intentionally, and that's totally fine. Now he's rested, recuperated, so to speak, mentally, physically, and ready to go. So, what I had to do is make sure that we were on the same page in terms of volume, and make sure that we're ramping up very carefully. And he completely agreed, said, yes, I don't want to get injured. I said, I don't want you to get injured either. So let's just, over the course of the first 2 weeks, let's just take a 2-week block and just build it very carefully and slowly, especially the running part of it. Just because he was doing a little bit of running, but very little. So, we're just taking it very, very slow, and then we'll build another 2 weeks from there. And ideally, because he hasn't told me his race plan yet for the year, but I'm anticipating not anything until late summer, maybe something short, potentially earlier, or like very late spring, early summer. So we got plenty of time. So we could do, 6 weeks of lighter training, but just gradually ramping up the volume and just being real diligent about it, I guess, or disciplined about it. Because we just can't go from 0 to 100, overnight, like Tim mentioned earlier. Just have to be careful with it and build it up timely, or build it up over time, so that you just absorb it in a healthy way and don't get hurt, if that makes sense.
And so let's say we have that athlete, and although they knew they need to take time off or wanted to take the time off, they come back and they're like, I'm not where I was. And they're frustrated, even though they know, on a deeper level that they're not going to be with, but they're still like, come on, I was pushing 250 watts on that Z1 ride in October. Why am I only hitting 190 today?
Right.
So how do you, and this is, I look at this a lot with my athletes, is that we have their zones that they left the year with. We know, when they left in October from their serious training, they were, we know their heart rate zones, we know their power zones. When you go to bring them back, which one do you look at, or not? Or do you combine them in some way, or do you just go by perceived exertion? What's your approach to that?
That's a good question. For this athlete, it's mainly rate of perceived exertion to begin with, because I don't want to push specific zones, especially on the bike, and even pacing on the run, because they're not at that same level anymore, just like you said. So I start that way, but then to keep them energized and motivated and in the right place mentally for each of the workouts that they do, I try to spot something that I can hone in on to reinforce as being something that they did really, really well. Like a PPT bike workout or something. I had an athlete today that was literally pushed 430 watts for that 30-second time frame. I've never touched 430 watts over a PPT interval, but this guy did, and it was like no problem. And so I reinforced how incredible I thought that was, and that he was receptive to that. It was, so I try to find those things, and then just keep reminding them that over the course of the next maybe 6 or 8 weeks, we're going to get you closer to where you were at the end of the season when you wrapped up your last race, and just have dialogue about it.
Yeah, it doesn't take long to get back.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's a process, but you do get back.
Right.
So,
right.
So Tim, how about the other athlete now, the one that trained that doesn't want to take the time off, right? And they train, and let's say this athlete doesn't have a big race until June. How do you deal with that now? They're still wanting to do their interval work in December, and so how do you get that? How do you divide up the season a little and make sure that they still get the rest that they need? And
I think it's changing of focus. Like I'll take the time to work on a weakness, and something that they necessarily won't want to do. So like if swimming's a weakness, doing some more band work, which quite honestly, I don't know that anybody likes doing band work. Or it might be mobility. It's to me, a great opportunity in the off season is to really work on the soft tissue, work on those hip openers, work on all those things that when you're really in the meat and the bones of your season, it's in there. You should be doing it, but let's face it, sometimes those are the things that are skipped. So making sure that the off season, we're kind of not putting Band-Aids on, we're healing all that stuff that maybe we broke down during the course of the season. So we're opening those hips back up. We're strengthening those glutes for the running things. We're working on all those connective tissues that we're really going to start hammering once we get into it. So the volume is just different. It may be it's definitely not the same time commitment, but there's a lot more little components and little videos that I have built in that are yoga based, that are mobility based, that are specific strength based stuff for them that keeps them energized, and it works on their specific weaknesses that they may have had, or an injury that kind of always seems to flare up. You have that runner that the ITB always flares up, or that Paraformers always flares up, once you start getting into the bigger mileage and something, or the hips go, on your bikers that are always hunched over. So I spend the off season really pummeling them with videos of mobility and strength so that we can negate that stuff once we kind of get into the season. Mm-hmm. So it keeps them they see there's a lot more volume there, so they don't feel like it's a down season, but we're working on all those little extra weaknesses at the mm-hmm. time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing, so during the season, and people are taking their blocks and their gels and everything that's in their bottle, which is never water, right? So after a while, they get pretty sick of that stuff, right? I mean, there is a Gatorade saturation point where you just I can't handle it anymore. So I think Kylie, you said before that maybe this isn't the time that you really need to zero in on race nutrition, but I balance it against what Tim was saying, which is if they're still putting in the workouts, they can't totally skimp. Is there some middle ground in there that says, well, maybe you don't need to use your exact race fueling, but maybe you can have a different drink or different food or different something that maybe isn't quite what you would use on race day, but isn't water in your bottle either? Are there alternatives to consider this time of year?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely time for some variety, spice it up a little bit, but keeping it simple, right? Obviously not having something that doesn't make sense in the performance equation, but there are plenty of real food options that aren't going to cause any GI distress, that are still going to make you happy. You're getting something in, that don't have to be necessarily sports specific fueling products. Right. So, I think we kind of get narrowed in on more of that race day mindset, and we absolutely have to be practicing that consistently, especially when we're approaching race day, 12 weeks out, we got to be nailing the fueling. But now's the time to have some fun and kind of mix in some variety. So that applies to the intra workout fueling. It applies to pre-workout, the post-workout fueling. Do you need to be doing your recovery shake? No, but what can we have that's still going to support our recovery needs as we start to build back some volume? So I think now is the perfect time to incorporate some variety, just making sure we're staying in the realm of what we need to be prioritizing in that fueling window is key. But keeping it simple, right? I think like complexity kills success a lot of the time. So we don't need to make it overly complicated. Like, what do you want in this instance? Just have it, you know, you'll learn the hard way if you're not going to tolerate it. Right.
Very true. Yeah. I was thinking that the other day, because during the season, I'm like, you know, I do my workouts, I take my clean recovery. I'm like, and this time, I'm like, how about some yogurt? Would that be okay? It still basically has the protein, you know, like, like that seems close enough, right? Right now. And just to try to give myself a break and why, from all the fake stuff, which I know is so important during, when you're really training. So, so this time of year, how much do you talk about, and I'll go back to you first on this, Tim. When do you set up the calendar for the year with your athletes? Like what the race season is going to look like? Is it now? Did it happen before? What's your
I actually said what I try to do is I send out right at New Year's, like your New Year's resolution. I do it with them. Like, what are your races that you're planning on doing? A, B, and C. And then certain goals that they want to do through the course of the year. So that's just a little email that I send out to my athletes. It's just kind of a little back and forth, and then it kind of gets me to plan out their season. I have some athletes that they want to race every month, and then I have other athletes that literally I'm doing this one Ironman. That's all that I'm doing, and so it's planning just for that one day. And then I have other ones that it's literally every 6 weeks they want to go do a half Ironman, and then it's an Ironman, then it's another half Ironman, then it's another Ironman. So every athlete's different, but I send out the email. It's just a nice little, I know exactly, there's no doubt, right? It's in an email. It's good. They're able to put out all their thoughts and feelings on it. And then I'm able to read it. And so there's no miscommunication in terms of what their races are, when they are, which one's an A, B, and C race, and really what they're trying to accomplish through the course of the year. And then we get on a quick phone call and kind of go through it.
Mm-hmm. So Bob, you got an athlete that tells you, okay, I am going to do a half marathon in February, and it's just for training. They go off. So how do you work? Let's say now I'm going to go back to your athlete that didn't do anything for 6 weeks or whatever, and they're back. And so by the time February hits, they've only been back to training for, let's say, 6 weeks or 7 weeks or so. So how do you train? Like, how do you work that in? And then how do you set expectations, I guess, for?
Yeah, that's a good one. Expectations, that'd be almost the first place that I would start is like, what are you expecting to get what are your goals basically for that race? Is it for fun? Are you literally trying to, get a personal best? What is the ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve? And once you know that, then I can back into, well, we have this much time after having this much of a break. So realistically, if let's say it's a set of personal bests, I'll just throw that out there. Then I would try to temper that a little bit and say that may be a little bit difficult because you'd have to train really, really hard, and there's risk of injury in there because it's such a short time window. So if they're looking to do it and have more of a fun situation, more of a long training day, do it with friends, for example, that's a different scenario. And I'd encourage that type of a mindset versus such a short window to get ready for a very competitive event. Even if it's a half marathon, for some of our athletes, that's not a big deal. But after an extensive break, that can beat you up pretty well. If you run a half marathon real hard, you can really feel that. So there's got to be conversation around that with the athlete and make sure that we're all on the same page. And if they need to be kind of reined in a little bit, I have to try to do that. So, because at the end of the day, I want them to achieve their goal, but I also want them to stay injury free. And that's the balance. That's what they have to hear,
Right. For sure. And one thing I want, and I'm going to stay with you, Bob, here, is that for people like we, I live in the Northeast now, and we really sort of have this expectation when our season is, because it's not quite as long as it is when I used to live in Florida. And I was, so how do you handle that, differently depending, how do you handle athletes differently depending on the climate that they live in? And both, I guess that is both what their training opportunities are inside versus outside, but also
Right.
I think that people who live in warmer climates tend to race more because there's more race opportunities available to them.
Right.
And so do you have sort of a difference in terms of how you approach those two, like a northern athlete and a southern athlete? Or
Yeah, I think so, because I have several athletes that are in like the New York area in Boston, like where you guys are, where Tim is. And so, the weather can be a big factor. Snow can be a factor. One athlete is in kind of the northern part of New York, so snow is definitely an issue. Going out and running, he's running on ice basically. And so, I'll look at his results and he'll say it was a nice run, but I was, treading lightly on ice, icy roads, that kind of thing. So that's difficult, to do a long run in conditions like that, unless you're on a treadmill. And that particular athlete is like, treadmills are a no-go. Just like Tim said earlier, absolutely not. I can't do a treadmill run. I'm the same way. I can do a treadmill run now and then, but not a 15-mile run on a treadmill. That would just about kill me. So I can't do that. So, so then what I try to do is focus on the other disciplines a little bit more, and maybe a little bit less on running for a certain time of the year when weather just isn't cooperating for that athlete. And then you might have another athlete where, running on a treadmill is absolutely no problem at all. They'll run 20 miles on a treadmill and not think twice about it. So then you can tailor that training plan very differently than you would for an athlete that says absolutely not. And then if there's an athlete, like I have one athlete, he's a run athlete based in Florida. So he's running right now. He's getting ready for a planned half marathon in February. And what I have to try to gauge there is the humidity and the temperature and the wind where he lives is a big factor. And we talk about hydration and nutrition, and we're practicing that now. So I'm not sure if I hope I answered your question, but there are ways to deal with it. You just have to understand what each athlete's tolerances are, so to speak. Like I said, running on a treadmill or not running on a treadmill, if that's an option. If there's a lot of snow and ice where they live at times of the year, that can impact their ability to get outside and run. Maybe shorter distances, not so much for long. So you have to tweak it a little bit. So in some of those cases, you might be able to spend a little more time on the bike, maybe get 3 sessions swimming when maybe they only do 2 sometimes during the year, and get some other strength training in that will help supplement their run when the weather cooperates and they're able to get back out more often. That help you? Sort of?
Yeah.
Good.
So playing off of that, Tim, you've got an athlete now who is, I'm going to say, training for half marathon end of February, and they live in a really snowy climate. And let's say they live in Buffalo and they just got 5 feet of snow and they can't go outside. So what if let's say they had to, 90-minute run on their schedule? How do you swap out something like that? What would you do?
I mean, if they're confined to home, I turn it into a bike. A lot of times is what I'll do. If they can get to a pool, I'll do some pool running with them. But a lot of times I'll turn that into a bike with some intervals, high cadence, low watts, and then with some other stuff to kind of build that back in. It's good for their mind and kind of feels, and for their cardio as well. So, when it's absolutely they cannot go outside because of the weather and they're trapped home because of that, then I'll turn it into some strength training, some mobility work, and then add in some extra bike with low watts, high cadence, and some other intervals to simulate the best that I can to keep their cardiovascular where it wants to be and the hip flexors firing and all that good stuff.
So a snowstorm is not an excuse to take off from a workout then. That's what you're saying. It's not a good. So when they type in, I couldn't do my run because it was snowing. No, that doesn't fly. No. Okay.
Coach Tim doesn't approve.
There's definitely alternatives. Yeah, definitely.
Oh. So I want to kind of continue with this, which is the barriers of re-entry, right? So how do you do, and Kylie, I'm going to start with you first on this compliance issues, right? Like it's so, I think that some of the hardest times to be compliant are when you've been so non-compliant for a period of time, right? And so you're going to get your trips and messes up. And how do you bring, well, first of all, like, are there certain triggers that you see that get people to be sort of fall off the wagon? And then how do you reset them and try to bring them back to consistency this time of year?
I think it depends on the individual. But a lot of people typically just need some structure, and a little bit of support in kind of building that structure around their week. I think the tough time, with the holidays and the craziness, right, is a lot of the extracurriculars of like parties and celebrations and happy hours and all that good stuff. And they kind of don't have control over what they might be eating or drinking in those environments. So I think adding some structure back helps make them feel better, right? Like, okay, I see you're going up in volume this week. One of your workouts, like, let's just build some ideas around meal planning for the week, right? And just kind of plugging in some quick and easy meals that they can kind of rely on, even with work and life and family and all that craziness still going on, right? I think just adding in a little bit of structure helps make them feel a little bit more comfortable moving into some more structured training. So the excuse sometimes is I didn't have the time, I couldn't find the time, or, I missed X thing, I had to go here. So I think it's just kind of building in some reassurances around, okay, well, let's add some structure. We can't skip breakfast every day just because we were up late, right? What's something quick and easy that's a grab and go option that's still going to fit our needs? So I think just kind of building that puzzle piece and adding in the structure is helpful for a lot of athletes who fall off the wagon, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So does that include, their timing of when they grocery shop or meal prep in advance or anything that can, make
Absolutely.
it less likely they're going to go through the drive-through and more likely they're going to pull out the healthy stuff?
A lot of it's just like strategizing on when to do those things, right? Maybe it's trying a coupon code for Instacart or one of the meal delivery systems. Maybe it's, using your Costco membership and exploring the online delivery options, right? Kind of leveraging the wonderful services that people have provided in our communities to help you, make that more accessible and help you support you, with your goals, right? Sometimes it's just being a little bit more mindful about when we're doing these things and how we can get there. So yeah, it's not easy, right? But a little planning goes a long way. So
that's very true. So, so Bob, how about you? You put your workouts in, you get them into the computer, and first week back, you see more reds than greens. How do you get people? What kind of barriers? And then they, I like it when my athletes still type in they're not excuses, but reasons for why they didn't get a workout done. I still think that's helpful to see because at least there's some thought process going through. I knew I was supposed to, but So how do you turn that around? How do you start getting people more consistent?
Yeah, I ask questions a lot, about why certain workouts were missed or what's going on during the course of the week. Is your work schedule crazy? You traveling? Are you not feeling well? And basically asking them, what do I need to do differently so that we can get more sessions that you hit from week to week? And sometimes it's just a matter of holding them accountable, in a very nice way, not like beating them over the head, say, what's going on, but just asking questions and showing concern. Because I'm concerned, I really want to know what is going on, in a very caring way, basically, right? It's
what can I do?
I'm sorry.
Right? Perfectly. What can I do as a coach to help get green? You nailed it. Perfect.
Yep, that's exactly right. So do I need to change things around or, do different workouts on different days? Do you need a certain day of the week you have to have off every week right now? Or do you need 2 days a week off right now? Or, just, the more questions you ask, the more you can figure out, what's going on in their lives, so that I can make adjustments to the plan so that they can hit them, so they can have a good, productive week and feel good about it. And that's, it's with dialogue and conversation, that's how we learn best to serve each individual athlete, because their needs are all so very different.
And convincing them that doing 45 minutes of the hour and a half workout's better than doing 0 of it.
Absolutely.
Right? So saying, hey, listen, you got 2 hours planned today. I honestly only have 45 minutes. What should I do? Like, tell them, just text. I tell my athletes all the time, listen, text, call me quick. If you had planned 2 hours, but you only have 45 and you can't bike anymore, but you can maybe run or lift, text me and I'll give you what will be most beneficial for the time that you have available. And like you said, just the communication, feeling like they can text you. Some coaches are different. I have more access. I tell my people, like, text me right away. And for that reason, other coaches, it might not be till later in the day because of their job needs. But I mean, I think, like you said, at the end of the day, we want to know what we can do to help you hit.
Right. And I have an athlete that does at times have to travel for work on very, very short notice. Like, literally, he could be 3 p.m. and he finds out at 3 p.m. you're flying out tomorrow morning going to wherever. And that changes up the whole thing. And he'll text me and tell me and say, look, I'm going to be traveling for 2 days. I won't be able to do this bike or that swim, but I can run, or I can get to the gym at the hotel I'm going to. Can we change things up? And I'm like, no sweat. Give me 10 minutes and I'll get it done. And so, I'd be as responsive as possible to meet the needs that, that they tell me that they have, and then make changes like Tim said. And then it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody feels good about it and still getting good quality work done. Even if it's like, shorter duration, it's still better than missing it completely. So.
Yeah. And it's also, I feel like this time of year that just being able to find that schedule that's going to work, knowing, of course, that things are going to play around and change it, but just finding that schedule and getting in that routine, because once you start missing workouts, it's a lot harder to make those workouts, right?
Right.
Like, I'm going to do it starting this week. Okay, next week. No, next week, and it's easy. It's like, if you can just work with them and adjust and make it happen. So
right. Yep. That's right.
Training and fits into the rest of their lives. So I want to try the flip side of that. And Tim, I'm going to start with you here. Is now you have the person who is like, you give them a Z1 ride and they do a Z3 ride, or they double the volume.
You've been looking
You've never
at my
seen that, have you?
athletes. Oh my God.
Never.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always go back and forth. It's like, do I mention that they added an extra 500 yards to that workout? Do I mention that? Okay, it was in the cool down. I'm going to let it, but I'm watching and I'm looking, So how do you, So how do you do when that happens?
Well, it's hard. It's hard. It's a balance. Sometimes it's tough love, and sometimes it's a question. So sometimes it's just athletes. A lot of times it happens in the nice weather around here. Like, they had a 3-hour bike ride, but they went on a group ride and they ended up doing 5. Like, and it doesn't happen that often. And it's not a big deal. And I'm just like, check in, or they let me know even before I've even looked at it. Hey, when you look today, it ended up being 5.5 and not 3, blah, blah, blah. And I'll make adjustments accordingly after, like the next day, if they had something, I'll change literally the next day and let them know, okay, based off what you did today, listen, don't forget tomorrow's going to be a little different now because of that. But a lot of times what I see is the athletes that add in the extra intensity, the extra time, all of a sudden the next week they start hitting reds. And why? Because they went too hard. And now they crash. And so it's trying to show them the pattern of every time you add extra time or intensity, you watch your neck workouts afterwards. You don't reach actually the workout. You actually do less than what you did that you were supposed to do this week. So trying to get them to understand that in a nice way. That's the only thing that I try to do. Outside You know, I don't mind if they go a little harder sometimes, but like I always try to do the old 10 to 15% rule. You know, like if you were supposed to do 200 watts for, 3 hours, if you did 220, 230, that's fine, or if you're supposed to run X, but try to keep it within reason. And if they don't, then it's all about my job is controlling the workouts afterwards to maximize what they did so that they don't burn out or overtrain afterwards, and reminding them that I know you thought you were doing this tomorrow. Well, you're not, because you did this today. So it's that communication with them. Does that make sense or no?
Yeah. And I always think it's fun when it's like, okay, I met up with a group ride, or I met up with a friend to run, and we went a little long. When that happens, everyone, that's totally fine. I totally get that. It's, just like, it was my friend's birthday and I had a piece of cake. Okay, that's all right. Let's do it. But if it's every day.
And we have those, I have those athletes that everything's green. Like, you doesn't matter what workout you give, they're going to do it exact. Like, they run around in their driveway until they hit the exact second, right? And then you have other athletes and you're like, I don't even know why I make a training plan up for them every week, because it's like they don't do 20% of what I assign to them. And it's trying to find that balance in the communication with them to get on the same page. Like in the previous conversation, I need to know what you need out of me on certain days. I can build in group rides. I can build in that stuff. And once I see what you did, I will adjust the next days accordingly afterwards. I have a couple pure cyclists that Tuesday and Thursday, they do these group rides. And based off of what they do, I adjust Wednesday and Friday. And sometimes I even say, listen, I know you like to do this on this group ride, but can we be the guy in the back today? We really need kind of a recovery day today. Or I'd be like, you know what? Go out front as much as you want. But that's having a personal relationship with your athletes and them trusting you and you trusting them. Right. And so I have that with a bunch of athletes. I'm like, that especially cyclists, they're big group ride people. So sometimes you're like, all right, listen, you're going for a 4-hour ride. Within, 120 minutes of it, you can have in zone 3. Everything else, can we do this? Can we not go over this? And having those pre-ride conversations. And for the most part, they're pretty good about it when they see the results.
Mm-hmm. But that's about, having the relationship and trusting the process, and not, understanding why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do. Right. So.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's just making adjustments and talking about it and then saying, okay, this is what you did. So tomorrow's going to just be a little different to maximize what you did today.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense. I'm curious now, does that work on the nutrition side? I had a really bad day. I ate like half a gallon of ice cream.
I ate an entire pizza.
Absolutely.
Right. So what is that next? Does the next day say, okay, well, you got to like hit the calorie deficit from the day before, or is it, no, let's just get you back on your plan?
Yeah, I don't necessarily love to fixate on calories. I like to focus more on like what the food is, what are the macronutrients we're getting. Like, okay, well, we had a little extra pizza, a little extra carbs and fat. That's okay. I hope you enjoyed it, right? Like, what's the focus for today? What can we kind of shift the balance from more of that health focus? And I think, not chaining yourself to like feeling bad about it, right? I think all foods fit in a balanced diet. Some fit a little bit more than others, right? I generally say like, oh, well, you think of an apple as a good food or a health promoting food, but a diet full of apples isn't necessarily the best diet, right? So I think perspective is key, and there's absolutely room for some more fun foods periodically, but I think enjoying it, moving on, and then kind of getting back on track the next day is what I would prioritize, not necessarily, beating yourself up over it, right? I think it's important to have that balance. And I think that balance mindset is a lot more sustainable in the long haul versus something that's restrictive or extreme, right? So that's generally how I like to approach it. And I think it ultimately is more fun and helps athletes have a more positive relationship with food and with themselves in that regard.
Kylie, I've got a question for you. I've always thought that, when, like, say during the week when you're training and, behaving yourself as far as your diet goes, personally, I think I'm pretty good at that. But I've always thought that you know, if Saturday comes around or Sunday comes around and, you know, you go out for dinner or whatever, and you have you know, enjoy a hot fudge sundae, making it up, whatever, you know, you're not going to derail your entire nutrition plan one day a week if you have something decent on a, you know, if you go out for dinner with your spouse or something. I don't think, right? I mean,
Absolutely not.
it's like if you do that every single day, yeah, right, that's a problem. If you have a big bowl of ice cream every single night for dessert, that's an issue. But you know,
It's like, what?
yeah, so like, wait,
He's like, what about every other day? How does that?
Yeah. Or you're eating the giant bag of peanut M&M every night, Tim. That might be an issue. You know, but
Family size one a
every
week.
once in a while,
I buy one on Sunday and I have all week to eat the family size bag of peanut.
But you know, when you do it just occasionally, I don't think you're derailing anything. It's like if you have a 6-month training block, I'm just a huge training block, and you need 3 days of training, your whole block's not shot, right? So keeping that perspective too with people, I think is important, because I like to treat myself once in a while. I love ice cream, so I do that, and I don't think, you know, I'm destroying, you know, the prior, you know, 6 weeks of effort or anything like that. You know, does that make sense? You kind of see it that same way?
And I absolutely agree with you. I think it's important to have those days. It's important to have those meals when we're not necessarily thinking about, you know, the calories, or we're not thinking about the macronutrients. We're just eating that food because it's what we want in that moment. And it's something that's enjoying, you know, we're a process of just being with our family. We're having that birthday cake, whatever it is, Friday pizza night. We absolutely have room for those types of meals, and we don't have to assign any morality to that food, right? It doesn't make you a bad person just because we have a food that's maybe not as nutrient dense as other foods that we have in our diet. So I think it's important to have those days, and like you said, you know, where they fit in our equation for the day, the week, the month, that's what's important, right? How frequently are we opting to have more of those fun foods or foods that necessarily aren't going to be great from a performance standpoint? I think that's when we need to have a little bit more of a serious discussion, but absolutely, we need to add that in.
Excellent.
So there's a lot of this. It's fine to go on a group ride and have fun with it. It's okay to not eat perfectly all the time. I mean, but keeping it all in perspective, and in general, getting in good habits. And this is the time of year to set them up, right? I mean, because what we do now is going to have such an impact on how we race in June, July, August, you know. So both if we go too hard or take a lot of days off, or really, you know, don't get a handle on just on some consistency. So this is I love this time of year, because I think it's like, this is the time I get to build everything up. And it feels in January like race season is so far away. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, it's here. Can I go back? I liked working on that structure and getting ready.
I think athletes, that it's this time that is the important part for race day, right? Like, how many athletes a month before the race, they're like, all right, they want to up everything. They want to get all their missed workouts in that they missed 3 months ago, 4 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, the basis for a successful race season is now, right? Laying that foundation. Like, you can't build to the top of the empire, you know, without a good foundation. John Spinney and Tim Snow used to always talk about the magic sandcastle, you know, adding the water and doing all that stuff. And that all starts with, you know, base. And now is base. And now is creating your unbreakable foundation that you can build to the highest peak that you can. And not taking for granted all the Z1 work that you do now, and all the strength work that you do now, and the consistencies that you do now.
Right. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think that that's a good place to wrap things up for today. And thank you so much. This was really fun and interesting. Just talking to you.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Great night, everyone.
See everybody.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.